One of the biggest pain type of ailments that people go through, especially as they get older, is joint pain and or arthritis. So today I want to talk a little bit about my own personal experiences with joint pain and arthritis and talk about how the carnivore diet actually helped me with that. So first of all, I started carnivore about 3.5 years ago, but let's go back to even before that. I had most of probably the last 20 years, I've ran into issues with joint pain and getting flare ups in different areas, different joints. So I'm talking about like my knees, my ankles, my wrists, my elbows, those types of places. Um, I wasn't really playing sports anymore or anything like that, but coaching. I was coaching football, I was coaching basketball, and it would get to the point that it would be really difficult to coach at times. One time in particular, I remember I was coaching youth football and I had a flare up in my knee, and it was my right knee, and it was swollen so badly. I had an e-brace on, and I I was walking with a very serious limp, couldn't walk very well. And when you're coaching football, that's hard to do. It's hard to coach when you can't be active, especially if you're, you know, more of a not necessarily intense, but somewhat intense coach that, tries to get, more into it, I guess, with the kids and show them different techniques and so forth. It's hard to do that when you're in so much pain, right? That was one example. I also coached youth baseball. I coached basketball too, but let's go to baseball real quick. One time I had a flare up on my elbow. My elbow just got really inflamed, and it was my right elbow. So, trying to go to shake hands with people was difficult. In baseball, especially after the games, you go and you shake hands with all the players from the other team and the coach and stuff. Well, you do that with pretty much, I guess, all sports. But anyway, I remember doing that when I had a really bad flare up to where I had difficulty even lifting my arm up all the way and could not really shake people's hands very well. And it was probably, I was more of a firm handshake type of person, but this particular case, it was probably the weakest handshake I've ever given. And it hurt so hard. Like I was grimacing in pain while I was shaking people's hands. That's how bad my elbow flare up was. Ankles and my feet. I had all kinds of issues with that. It seemed like, especially for about the last 5 years before carnivore, I would get a flare up on one of my feet, probably about once every couple of months. And the flare up would usually last a couple of weeks where it was completely swollen. I'd sit there and ice it, elevate it, that kind of stuff, wear ankle braces, and it would just, be really bad. The last time I remember, well, even going before the last time, I started noticing in my big toes that they would start hurting and then the flare up would happen. And the last time it had been like 3 weeks and I was still swollen on my right foot. And, big toes, one of the things that you think of is gout. So I went to the doctor thinking it would be gout, and it came back. There was no issue with uric acid or anything. It wasn't gout, but they did x-rays and saw I had actually arthritis in both of my big toes. And they referred me to a specialist, which I couldn't get into for like 3 or 4 months, which was crazy. But anyways, it ended up being like 5 or 6 weeks of this flare up before it finally started to ease some and the inflammation went down some. And, I could barely walk or anything. I was using crutches and so forth. It just was miserable. And this is kind of how my life was. Like I dealt with all this pain and everything for so long. And, I was overweight too. And I said, I got to do something about my weight and so forth. And maybe that'll help a little bit with some of this pain. It won't be quite as bad type of thing. So first I found keto and knew some people that were doing that and having success. So I went to low carb and I did that for about 3 months. Didn't really see a whole lot of difference, but I did lose a little bit of weight. But during that time, I did a lot of research on carnivore, and I ended up going to the carnivore diet in July of 2022. So now it's 3.5 years later, but the biggest thing that I noticed was a lot of that joint pain and that arthritis in the big toes was gone within a couple of months. Really, like I noticed fairly quickly in that I wasn't having some pain that I was having before. But within a couple of months, I could say, it's been a few months. I haven't had any type of flare ups on anything. By the time I was at 6 months, it was like, there still hasn't been anything. This doesn't make any sense. At a year, it was like, I have never gone that long in like the last 20 years without some kind of flare ups of something, whatever. And basically, I went carnivore. Now, people might say, that makes no sense. Like, just because you're eating meat, like all of a sudden you're not having that issue anymore. Like I used to eat meat before. Well, I don't know that it was necessarily just because I was eating meat. I think it's what you stop eating when you go to carnivore. And that might be the true superpower of carnivore, because you stop eating all those highly processed foods. You stop eating sugar, and you get less inflammation in your body. So inflammation starts to go away. I think also I dealt for a long time with oxalate issues because I was eating a lot of baby spinach and stuff like that. Onions, peanut butter, all that stuff high in oxalates. And I was no longer eating that stuff with carnivore because you take that out of your diet. You don't eat that anymore. And I think that helped as well. So I think that's some of the biggest improvements is because of what you're no longer eating. You're no longer eating that stuff that just isn't healthy for you, that isn't good for you. And, I can't say that it's fully just that. I think that's a huge part of it. But I think that what makes it even more special is that the food that you are eating is very nutritious food. It has a lot of nutrition to it, minerals, vitamins that you need. Pretty much everything you need. Like you don't have to supplement after you've been doing carnivore for a while, at least. You may do it still at the beginning, but after a while, you don't supplement anymore, with vitamins or anything like that. And it's because how much nutrition you're getting from the food and how much your body is absorbing. That's even more important. Like your body absorbs that, the minerals and the vitamins from animal meat better than it absorbs vitamins and minerals from fruits and vegetables and stuff like that, right? It's a higher absorption rate, so you're getting more of that. And I think you put all that together along with like what I was saying, the not eating those bad foods anymore, those foods that cause inflammation in your body, that really makes a difference. Now, I can't say that everybody is going to notice the same difference in the same time period. It might take you longer. It could take even a shorter time, who knows, but it could take longer before you start to notice relief of, joint pain and arthritis and stuff like that. I've heard people that have issues with oxalate dumping that goes on for a few years after they're not eating oxalates anymore. Whether or not that is really true or not, I don't know, but that's what I've heard from people. I can only go by my own personal experiences, and I didn't seem to have that anymore, except for one little issue with not eating, but taking an antibiotic this past summer did cause me some oxalate dumping issues, but that's another story. But anyway, so that's like the power of carnivore, right? Is it's not just all the nutrition that you're getting, but you're getting rid of those bad foods that you were eating before that was causing causing inflammation in your body and so forth, and you're not eating that anymore. And because of that, you're doing better with your joint pain and arthritis. For me, I haven't had really any joint pain at all, and the arthritis that was in my big toes is not bothering me at all. I have not had new x-rays to see if the arthritis is completely gone or not. So I can't tell you whether it's gone or not, but I don't have any pain with it. I can bang those big toes into the wall or into the bed or something, and I don't feel pain from it. It doesn't flare up, any of that kind of stuff. That just doesn't happen anymore. And that's because the inflammation is gone out of my body.